If you can publish a piece of content that is good enough, you're seeing how it's going to work and whether or not you need to optimize.
Meet Funaro. She's the head of content at Scribe. She came into the company wanting to produce hundreds of blog posts, but encountered a huge problem. Flash forward 12 months, she's produced 700 blog posts, increased traffic from 8,000 to 70,000 monthly viewers, and increased paid signups by 1,100%.
If I had tried to subscribe to the rules, we would never have achieved what we had the opportunity to achieve.
In this episode, you'll learn the importance of changing your center of gravity for how you pick keywords, a counterintuitive approach to seeing early results, and the value of picking the right tools to optimize for content creation, management, and SEO. I'm Tommy Walker, my guest is Funaro, and this is The Cutting Room. Lauren, tell me about your content marketing philosophy and how has it evolved over time?
It is our responsibility as content marketers to understand the different frameworks and playbooks and strategies that are out there so that we can confidently break the rules. And I say this from a perspective first as a writer. I went to school for English literature and my minors were in psychology and philosophy. And just like language, content marketing has several rules that you need to follow. Think syntax, colloquialisms. If you're writing for a certain language, you are going to need to understand what those rules are. The thing is, if you stick to those rules, you're going to have a very basic, plain, consistent, but maybe nothing very exciting coming from that. What you see growth from and what you see excitement come from is when you know how to break those rules and make educated guesses that can help you create something new with a purpose. So that's from the writer's perspective there. I think having understood what those playbooks were, we were able to make educated guesses so that we could take risks, but not just risks that were throwing something at the wall. We were able to understand what had worked and then try to strategize something that could potentially work for us.
Awesome. Okay. So tell me this. I think a lot of us know what the content marketing playbook is, but you tell me, what were the rules as you saw them, and then how did you break them? And I really want to dig into that because I think that that philosophy is one that I don't hear nearly enough about. And I kind of want to hear that before and after mindset shift.
That is such a great question. And I think that the answer is fluid, but we have a very unique opportunity at Scribe, especially. We have a product that is incredibly horizontal. We can support any real persona. And I came from a background that was very much, this is our ICP. We know exactly who we are talking to, and we are living within the confines of what they need from what we already know. We are going to publish content that is already out there, that is already proven to be doing well, and we are going to publish at a very successful, steady rate. We are going to edit that content to make sure that it gets out there to hit the standard that we know we want it to hit. And that means we will publish maybe 15 blogs a month, which isn't anything to scoff at. I think that's still success. But in doing that, you are operating on the playbook. You're creating content for an audience that you already know. And then you are giving them exactly what you know they want. And that's great. That is the playbook. That is the framework. What we had a unique situation for was we didn't know any of that when I came into Scribe. We weren't sure exactly who our ICP would be. We weren't sure exactly what their major pain points were. And we didn't want to box ourselves in because having a horizontal product means anyone can use it. We didn't want to say, oh, we're talking to, I'm not sure, HR. Oh, I'm talking to operations. If I'm just talking to them, I'm going to exclude everyone else who could potentially get value out of my content and out of my product. It turned out that persona specific content doesn't hit in the same way that use case centric content does. The reality is people have various pain points, and we're talking to individuals with those pain points. We're helping solve their problems. And in order to do that, you need to look at the individual and not the persona. That is a major shift that I found. And I'm not going to say it works for everyone, but it's absolutely worked for us. And it's been imperative in identifying the content that's going to resonate and is going to convert. We figured out that there is a type of person that is likely to use Scribe, and they can work anywhere. They can be in any company, in any department. The go-to person is essentially the one who is constantly solving everyone else's problems because they understand your processes and your tools the most. So you'll be getting quick questions throughout the day, hopping on a Zoom call. I'm sure there are several people on this call who are very familiar with what it feels like to be a go-to person. And the resonance of a go-to person unlocked for me, especially, so much in what sucks about being a go-to person. What am I asking myself? And really, it comes down to time. I need more time to do my job. I need to answer these questions quickly and solve other people's problems and upskill them so that they can perform well. So identifying in these different personas, say it's accounting, say it's HR, what that go-to person is doing and finding the common thread to identify the different content types that are going to be really useful for them.
True. I want to get into the next portion of the show because we promised folks that we would talk about 700 plus blog posts. So we've got, I'll just kind of sum this up, right? We've got the keyword strategy. We're working around use cases. We are deciding that we're going to do clusters around these use cases, do the hub and spoke model. But we have that in mind. Now, tell me about the process of creating 700 plus blog posts in a year. What does that look like? Because that is a massive scale, and I know that there's a ton of interest in the hook of the episode. So let's talk about that.
How the heck does it actually happen? And I find myself asking that question again and again because when I look back on it, we've learned so much and evolved so much that it's really fun to dig into the mistakes we made to get to where we are now. When I came in, I think it was March of 2022, and I sat down with Jacob at the time and we were discussing how can we expand what we have. What that meant was working with several freelancers to build an initial backlog of content. This backlog was not published at all, and it was about a little less than 200 blogs that we were sifting through with the topics that we had identified that we were making a bet on to work. And
how long did that take?
That
build
was
out that initial 200 backlog.
That was several months. That was
okay.
I would say starting February to March. We published that big push in May, and once we did that, we were able to, in the month of May, publish a little less than 200 blogs all at once.
Insane.
It was pretty crazy, and I'm not sure if it's the best thing to do from a perspective of just publish it all, but absolutely, we very early on got leading indicators of what content worked, what topics worked. We were able to shift from the idea of more persona centric to use case centric, and then double down on the content that was clearly resonating. We are a PLG company, so I'm able to directly see if someone is going to become a user and whether or not that content's working to convert. So, okay, let's see that this piece of content is converting. How can I then use the content that's high traffic to funnel into that content? Or how can I create more content like that? Once we published that larger push, we were publishing at a pretty regular cadence, about 25 blogs a month for the next couple of months. I then remember going into our first marketing onsite, and our CEO was there. We were looking at the numbers, a lot of early indicators. We were very excited. And she asked, how can we 4X this? So I'll go into what that looks like. At the top of each month, you are going to have a very strong backfill of keywords. This means you've also done your keyword research to look at the potential traffic, because remember, you're going to be looking at projections. You need to start building this out to make your case. You're going to have those keywords. You're going to be building them around a topic cluster so that you can more easily research keywords. We have our topic. Okay, let's look in Ahrefs and see what keywords are working with that. We built a framework that we were able to work around, so that got very easy. Once we did that, I was in brief world. I am very much a contender of big, bulky briefs. I think that a brief needs to get that writer about 60% of the way through, because I did not have the time to do back and forth feedback with my writers. And I think back and forth feedback is so, so valuable, but I was not in the position to have the capacity to do that. I needed to get a draft that was as close to done as I could possibly get it. In creating those briefs, you need to be looking at a couple of different things. One, what is my goal? What are the goals of my team? And how can I convey that to the writer? What is this blog supposed to accomplish? Am I converting? Am I building a list for leads? How can I give this person what they need to know to do that? And then two, what is the goal of the SERP? What is this responding to? What are we answering? Make sure all of that is in the brief. Another major player here is, how does this fit into the ecosystem of content I've already created? Where can this blog link to from other blogs? What other blogs are going to link to that? This should all exist in the brief. Templatizing that brief was a huge part of how I was able to send this out as quickly as possible. And I have to commend the genius freelancers that we were working with. Remember, we'd already identified them earlier on, because they also understood our product, our goals, our high velocity. And we gave them a very large style guide that talked about not just our brand and our voice, but what our product was, a lot of product education and boilerplate copy that they could use and pull from. The rest of the month, once the briefs were assigned, was bracketing each week to review and publish each week, so that I could hit those targets, those activity goals, and then being willing to accept good enough. This is the biggest key, because if you can publish a piece of content that is good enough, that may not rank number 1 yet, but just might rank number 4, guess what? That content's out there. The content exists. You're seeing how it's going to work and whether or not you need to optimize. Then you can create an optimization funnel. Optimization is a major part of what we do at Scribe. We are constantly optimizing our content, and every single month we're setting optimization goals along with net new targets, because content is a living thing. Content is something that is going to change as the algorithm changes. If you don't publish it though, you can't optimize. It won't rank at all. So when we were willing to say good enough is good enough, get the content out there, we could then go back and make the changes that need to be made to turn the good content into great content, or archive content that was maybe repetitive and cannibalizing. Take this and put it over here, make it so that it became this symbiotic process that we were consistently changing. And that is what we did for a couple of months at publishing 100 blogs per month. And once we felt that we had reached a very large amount of content and we had enough to optimize, we were then able to slow down to now at about 30 or so net new blogs a month. And I'm very proud to say we now have well over 800 blogs, but within that year, we had gone above 700.
That's incredible. You don't hear that enough. And that's actually not something that I would like. That's almost counter entirely to what I would recommend. I mean, you're getting it out there into market, seeing if there's even an opportunity to break out into the SERP. And then if you do, then going, that's the one we're going to double down on.
Exactly.
Which is really incredible, because you already have an idea of what it is that you're going to, you know, when you're looking at it, I imagine you have an idea of how you can make this thing better. But why spend the time on it if it's not going to do what you want it to do?
It's interesting, because had you asked me this before we did this, I would have absolutely agreed with you. I was such a proponent of the perfect article. I could edit an article to death. I think any content editor or content manager can edit an article to death. The reality is that was not the environment we were in. We needed to learn. We needed to experiment. And Scribe, luckily, is a very experiment-forward company. We are in the business of failing fast and learning. And in doing that, there is a lot of grace in accepting that that content can always improve, and doubling down, like you've said, on the pieces of content that are really going to work for us, or recognizing where content is too much, where information gain needs to exist, live on the SERP, but it's not going to be a converting piece of content. Understanding that these are several pieces that are working together to achieve a goal, because that gave us the opportunity to very quickly achieve topical authority on the clusters that really mattered to us and pivot from the content that wasn't going to do what we needed it to do. So I agree. Now I'm very lucky to be in the position to take much more time to edit and redefine, go back, optimize, perfect my content. Had I been doing that then, we would never be where we are now. We wouldn't have had the
Right.
chance to publish as much as we did. And that was the bet we made.
I love that. It's almost like a and I've talked to a handful of people about this too. It's almost like a 𝗱𝗶𝗹𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 type situation where if you have a piece of content that you keep optimizing it is it the original pice of content? And it's
Yes.
like yes and no. I mean, you get the piece out there, it does well enough, and then you say, okay, cool, let's do that. Now I would be remiss if I didn't ask, how many authors were you working with?
I have to credit these brilliant freelancers. So from the original days, we were working with what I would now consider too many. So we had upwards of 15 writers that we were working with
Okay.
consistently. All of them were brilliant, but from a management perspective, it became too difficult.
Yeah.
Now we work with about between 5 and 10. And since our goals are much less, our net new content is at a much slower pace, I'm able to have incredible relationships with these writers and to much more clearly articulate what is needed from them. I also have to credit, I now work with a part-time content editor, 𝗂𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, who is incredibly talented, and please don't poach her, but please find her on LinkedIn, and helps me work with these writers to get that good content to great much more quickly. And we just have the luxury of time now. So that's the number we're working with.
All right, that's good to know. And it sounds like now that you really have an idea of what's working too, it's kind of slowed down. Let's take more of let's publish the first draft, or the thing that we publish is probably going to be better than what you did initially, right? Is that
Totally.
still, did
Totally.
you kind of transition from that now that you know what's working?
Totally. And we learned a lot in publishing those pieces. So we were able to templatize a lot. It's going to vary
Mm-hmm.
based on the needs of the SERP, but you, especially with the pillar page, can identify what those general frameworks are going to be. Another thing that helped us very much, and I think I want to dig into my tool stack now, if that's a relevant time to
Yeah,
talk about it.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we initially, when we were doing this process, we're working with disparate tools. We were using Google Docs to create our briefs and assigning those out to writers. We were corresponding with them through email. And then I was using Asana to manage the entire process from assigning them the brief to then getting it in and getting it published. I love Asana. I want to make that very clear. I consider myself a power user of Asana, but it was still not working, especially when we needed to get into that 4X conversation, right? We needed
Mm-hmm.
something to help us move quickly and to cut any of those ends. Because even when I was getting that content back, I'm editing in Google Docs, I'm marking it done in Asana, and then I'm going into Webflow, which is our CMS, copying and pasting everything, reformatting it, adjusting sizes of images. It was taking too long. I did not have time. And the tool that we ended up using is called LetterDrop, and it absolutely fell into my lap. And when I say fell into my lap, I mean there was a call on my calendar and I didn't even know what it was. And this tool completely revolutionized how we were able to do this, because it lives all in that single tool. So this means my
Yep.
content briefs, my management process, my writers and my correspondence with my writers, and even my publication, because it integrates with Webflow, exist in one single tool. And I don't have to go to these various different places and understand where everything is. So now even my optimization lives in there. That was my initial sell for LetterDrop. What made it even better was how I was able to templatize my briefs and then use their SEO tools to
Yep.
create those briefs so much more quickly because they are connected to what's going on in the SERP. So they're pulling those initial blogs that are ranking #1, and then they're identifying, here are the gaps in those pieces, here's where information gain is, and it's very forward thinking. So you're not focused on keyword stuffing, you're creating content that's really matching that intent. So I'm not doing that manually myself when I build that brief for the writer.
Yeah, shout out to the Letter Drop crew. I've been talking with the founder over there, and they are doing some pretty incredible stuff. Tell me what your process is before you sit down to pregame for an article. So this is, for me, I like stand up and walk away from my desk and like walk around in circles and sit here with angst. I've had some folks say that they like literally sit on their hands. So they do when they do their read through. What is it that your pregame process looks like before you sit down to edit?
I also am a major pacer. I love to pace. I also very much need to edit more than once because I've noticed that your mindset when you're going into the article, if you already know what you're looking for, you're going to be finding it where it might not be. And that means like you're investigating and you're trying to piece it. I'm also trying to be better at this, but I tend to add comments in that first read through. I need to be better because sometimes they'll answer the question 2 lines later and I'm like, okay, delete that comment. So when I'm pre-gaming, essentially I'm looking at them in total, right? I have a holistic cluster that I'm working toward. I'm looking at what that blog is and how it functions across the other blogs. And then I'm thinking in regard to what my goals were. What did I need this content to do? Let's take a look at that brief. Okay, here's what I asked them to do. Now, what did this incredible writer do with what I've provided them with? I'll read through it once and I will add my comments into it. And then I'll go back in and I will likely be focused on what that message is, where we're not getting what it is I need it to get. In a perfect world, I'm able to then give this back to the writer. If not, though, I'm usually going to be restructuring and recalibrating it so that it has, if you think of it as a funnel, it starts with the intent of the search, and then I'm able to then create my CTAs, create the Scribe story as part of that content. So then I'm looking for the ways that I can introduce Scribe organically and create it so that the inevitable conclusion is that Scribe is the solution to whatever that problem is that we've presented in the content. Then I'll go in and I'll do the much more line by line edits, as in this could have been one to 2 to 3 sentences, and instead it is a large paragraph and there is very much a run-on situation going on. Let's simplify it. And I'll have back and forth with my writers if I can, because typically they're just not used to writing in that style and they need some feedback to help them understand it. And then we work quickly. We get that bad boy published. And over the next month, I'll be looking at, we use Mixpanel to measure the success, see whether or not the traffic's doing well, and then how we're doing in direct signups. And as the months go on, I'm able to see how we're comparing against our projections, how well did that content work, and if I need to add it into my optimization efforts.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. That was actually, that was very, that was a lot to work with. I like that. Thank you. This is the best part of the show in my mind because we get to look inside Lauren's mind as we go through. So before we get into the piece, tell me, what was your initial reaction to the piece? We've got content scaling, 7 tips for creating high quality content. So
one, I thought this was the perfect article to choose for me and the topic we're discussing, and I appreciated that you found it. And 2, I think this is also an excellent example. 1, for the hub and spoke model. There were so many opportunities in this piece where we could create several other articles. And 2, this is a great example of why we need large briefs in the beginning, why you need to create a brief that is very clearly articulating what you want that content to accomplish. I think this is a great first draft of an article, but in my position of trying to create high velocity, it wouldn't have achieved what I needed to achieve, but it would be great to get out there, see what's working, and then optimize to then make better. Had I given them a stronger brief at the beginning, I think that this would have been a more powerful article.
All right. Let's jump into the piece itself, right? So first First line here, content is one of the most powerful ways to reach new audiences and promote your product and brand.
That's a very powerful statement, but they never tell us why. They don't give us any reason to believe that there's emphasis there. I do understand that my reader already knows what they want. They're already in the position of looking how to scale, but we're also telling them how hard it is to scale, right? We're trying to make the case that this is a tough thing to do. You need our tips and our tools to accomplish it. We need to be making the case that this is something worth doing. And we don't see why it's so important ever really in this article. We don't reaffirm that claim later on.
Now you say here too, think of a blog like an essay. Everything in the intro should build on each other to support your main thesis statement. I've been saying this a lot more lately as I've been doing more in-depth edits with some folks, is we've got like the theme is stated at the very beginning, but very frequently, we forget to tie things back to it or deliver on the promise of the headline, which is why people got there in the first place. We've got that going on here in this piece, but I want to ask, instead of like talking about it in this piece specifically, why do you think that is? Why do you think we sometimes have a hard time tying things back to the thesis statement, or more importantly, coming up with a strong thesis statement in the first place?
That's a great point. And I think it's because we're looking at keywords. I think that we are trying to figure out, okay, this is what exists. This is out there in the SERP. We're trying to match all of those needs. We're probably creating H2s, fulfilling that. We're not looking at this as a convincing piece of content. It is a very easy mistake to make because we're not necessarily understanding the priority of the person reading your piece. The point of this content should be to help this person use your product or tool, solve for that solution. So we need to be building upon an actual theme and story narrative instead of just a single word that we're trying to plug in throughout the rest of the piece.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think what I've found too is that we're almost trying to cover off too many things, and we end up lacking a singular focus because we see this variety of key phrases that are all somewhat similar, related to each other. And it's like, we want to go after the semantically related key phrases, but it can take us off in so many different directions. And it's like one idea that we want to go after in the whole thing, and then one idea per paragraph, please. Like,
totally. Think of it as building up. You have this initial piece. How can we build up and expand on it? Just like an essay, just like in school, except it's much more fun and much more compelling than it used to be there. And the reason the hub and spoke model works so well is because you can be so focused. I've actually run into experiences in a learning experience with me where we would have in briefs, make sure to cover these topics to interlink. And then we'd get paragraphs about those topics. I'm like, we don't need that actually. Just start here. Let's just focus. Let's be very clearly focused.
Now, what is your recommendation for intros in general? Because we've got several words here, right?
Yep.
And you've got, this part right here, you have the majority of your feedback, or a lot of your feedback, comes in the intro itself. What is your What is your recommendation for creating better intros beyond what we've just sort of talked about?
Be concise. Just think hook, and then think, how can I establish the rest of this content? We don't need several paragraphs. That intro is just there to get a person interested in reading the rest of your content. If you have several sentences that are long-winded, a person's not going to care. You're not going to grab that person's attention, and that's your goal there. It's to have them read the rest. Don't put everything in the intro.
I often like to tell people to, like, and if you've watched the show before, then you've heard me say the research behind it shows that the average American reads nonfiction at 238 words per minute, which means it can take you, if you're taking 300 words to get to your point, you've already spent a minute sometimes telling them what they already know, right? What I like to think about when I look at the headline is, okay, so we'll think about the headline, but as the first actual sentence of the piece, and then the first sentence should actually be like the second sentence of the piece, right?
I love that. Like, you've presented already what you're thinking, what the point is. So now we're building on it and we want to get them farther down. Once we've
Yeah.
gotten them farther down the page, it is so much easier to maintain their attention.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I recommend to folks too is never start from a place of neutrality, right? I talk about,
Mhm.
I've only recently started talking about this a little bit more, but it's like positive charges and negative charges. A lot of times, what we'll find in introductions is it's like, this is the thing that we're talking about, right? Here, content is the most powerful way to reach new audiences and promote your product or brand. There is no charge to that, right? There's
Yes.
no energy to that. So the way I like to think about it is start from a positive place, right? Because then you have some place to go either into the negative, or start from a negative place and work your way into the positive, and you can start to create like a roller coaster effect, if you will,
I
of
love
emotion.
that.
Because
Yes, you've actually hit them somewhere that matters. You've
right,
made your claim and now we need to be building somewhere versus flat dense reading. And
right,
again, sometimes you're just answering a question, solving a problem, but if you think about it from a storytelling perspective, what is the hero and what is it that they're trying to solve? How can I
yeah.
introduce that as clearly and as succinctly as possible? And that's where your intro comes into play.
Yeah, and what were they doing right before they clicked? Right? Like,
Yes.
what's the thing that led to the search and the thing that led to the reason why they clicked on you instead? So, if it's a search piece of content, right, we're optimizing for search,
Yes.
what got them there? Because people aren't just typing this stuff in willy nilly, right? And
And
it's
they're
not
definitely not doing it to read my beautiful prose. They want to
right,
figure out how to solve their problem.
right. And the other thing I ask is, what are the stakes if they don't solve the problem, right? Like, you
Yes.
know, we don't talk about that nearly enough, is what's happening before they get there. And I think that's something to really think about. One, as you're briefing, but two, when you go into the article, is like, what state of mind are they already in? And then how do you get
Yes.
them to go further?
And how can you charge that, like you said?
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Scaling is hard, though. It's time resource intensive, which leaves a lot of brands feeling overwhelmed and behind. In fact, a survey by the Content Marketing Institute revealed that 64% of content marketers said greatest educational need is understanding how to create a scalable content strategy. Okay,
Yep. That
what'd you say?
is that is a statistic, and it's awesome. I think that we want to add statistics, but why did we put it in? We're just saying this is hard. Like, how are we going to make this something that this person is interested in doing, instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying, oh well, scaling content is hard? What I need them to know is this is hard. Your competitors are doing it. This is why 64% of them say they need to figure it out, not because it's hard, but because they're absolutely trying to figure out to do it because it works. And if they do it and you don't, you're not going to be able to accomplish what you want to. And
Yep.
that is the through line that would then compel me as a reader to continue to read and try to take these tips and solve my issue from that perspective.
Yeah, and I always like to ask questions like, why? Why did
Yeah.
64% of marketers say their greatest educational need is understanding how to create a, like, that's a very long sentence in the first place, but
Yes.
what are the stakes? Again, if they don't figure this out, their boss is going, "Hey, how can we 4x this?" And they're going,
That's hard. That sucks. I guess I'm not going to do it. You're
and
absolutely
that's
right.
and that's why they came to this article in the first place, right?
Because
So,
it is something they have to do. And
right,
we need them to know at the end of our intro, this is something you need to do. And it's
right.
actually achievable. And here's why it's achievable.
Right. Okay, cool. Moving on. While having lots of content has plenty of benefits, it needs to be good content. Otherwise, your efforts will go completely to waste. Or completely go to waste. All right.
Yeah. And that's just a final sentence right there. But it ends it. It cuts us off. I don't feel like I am compelled to then read on because there is something exciting here. And you don't need to be like long-winded and digging into what's next. So I recommended a very simple sentence. With the right strategy and tools, you can 10x your output and still make content that people want to read. I think
Yeah.
that one, it's very tangible. I've given them something that they could use and understand and could help them achieve their own goals, upper management goals. And then I now understand I need to read so I can get these solutions there.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Let's move forward. Content scaling refers to expanding your. Okay. I, I need to step in for a second here. We're gonna go through this. I hate phrases like this. I haven't read the actual comment yet because I like to have the guests go through this. I hate phrases like this. What is content scaling? It's in the I already.
Here's what you need to think about, though. They're trying to get that in there, right? What is content scaling is probably in the SERP. They need to make sure that they're getting that because they're trying to get that featured snippet. I know that's exactly what they're trying to do here, but it's not good.
I get it. Like, I get why someone's saying, but who is typing this? Like, if I'm on a thing about content, if I clicked on the piece that said content scaling, I have an idea. I don't need you to tell me what is content scaling.
Water is indeed wet, is what we're getting here.
Right. Right. So, like, okay, so what'd you say to this? What did you say to this?
I can't read this, is what I said. And this is going to be a very thorough line here, is that readability is what matters. Okay, I get it. You're trying to do a what is content scaling here. But also remember, you're talking to a content marketer in this article. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they probably know what they're talking about. And let's see how we can provide them with information that is beneficial to them. Content scaling is blank. Here's a sentence. Also, content scaling is super important because companies are using it to achieve this. Like, let's give them something that they can sink their teeth into, and then let's move on to the tips that they need.
Yeah, I would say too, something like this. Okay, so as a content marketer, I understand why you're doing this. I think we all hate that you're doing this. I think you hate that you're doing this as you're writing it. But there is something important here, knowing your audience, right? Knowing that your audience is this. What is content scaling? Okay, so here's what it is, but here's what it is to me. This is something that's really important, is like, okay, content scaling is obviously creating more content and quickly. Sure. But here's what it could be if you're doing it the way that I'm recommending, or if you're doing it with the tool that I'm recommending, or if you're using these methodologies. This is what content scaling could be. This is how I think about it.
Here's what it is to me, and using you, I am such a fan of. I am always encouraging my writers to insert themselves in the content whenever they can, because it is not coming from a brand. It is coming from a person with a perspective. What you're getting there is thought leadership. And then you're also getting someone that clearly understands what they're talking about. And I want to know that I'm reading a piece of content from someone who gets it and cares about it like I do. So I'm absolutely open to personality and to infusing a perspective, a very clear POV. And that's what really storytelling is in content like this.
Yeah, and brands can do this. In fact, some of the brands that have the best communications do have a point of view on what it is that they're trying to do. The brands that do this is, you can take the byline out of this, you could take the brand out of this, and you wouldn't know the difference. But there are definitely some brands that are out there where you're like, I know who that is, even if it doesn't say it. It's a very distinct tone of voice.
And it's not that it needs to be like quippy or catchy or anything. It just needs to be clear, and it needs to double down on whatever it's claiming it is important to it.
Yep. Okay, so when is scaling content creation important? What do we got here?
Love this. Scaling content creation becomes important when you want to widen your reach. My response there is, this very much feels like a well-duh statement. Like, okay, yeah, obviously, when you want to widen your reach, I honestly think we should have framed this into a why is scaling content creation important? Because we are trying to give this person a reason to really want to do it. Again, this person already thinks it's kind of important, but we need them to think this is super important because I need to continue to read this article and gain what I can so that I can lean into it. So I very much simplified it with what it said. And then I put very specific examples of what content scaling can do. You're building brand recognition and exposure. You're organically capturing qualified leads. You're educating potential users on how your product solves their problems so that they can place themselves in it and be like, okay, I fit into this narrative. Here's why I need to be doing this.
In fact, Funaro from Scribe published 700 blog posts in a year, and as a result, increased traffic by 937%. And like, why is it important? Because if you're going against someone like Lauren, who is doing this work, you're going to get buried because she's going to own you in the SERPs every single time. That's why it's important, right? So Why is scaling important? That's why.
Yeah,
Because you're going to get buried if somebody else is doing it and you're not, right? So,
exactly. We need them to be not afraid, but we need them to understand there are stakes here.
yeah.
And that's why this content exists.
No. Fear is okay. Fear is an excellent motivator, right? Um,
We want them to be terrified. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, no. I mean, seriously though, like publicly traded companies, because I've worked with publicly traded companies. Publicly traded companies, they are asking questions like this. The subtext behind a search like this is, okay, so how do I do it, right? Like, if I'm looking
Yeah.
up 7 tips for creating more high, I want actual tips, right? And something
Yeah.
I want to get to is that we're already how many words are we into this already?
We're definitely halfway through.
We are 349 words into the piece, which means we're about a minute and a half of the read time if I'm reading this word for word and I don't have any tips yet.
Mm-mm. I don't
So,
even know what my tips are going to be about.
right. Okay. So, and then I'm scanning. Create a style guide is tip 1. Outsource content. Okay. There's something to it.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
There's tips here. There's definitely tips here. One, I don't think that these tips are necessarily selling what we want them to sell. I
Right.
think that I would highly recommend putting whatever it is that your solution is much higher up, and then kind of framing it like you need this. There are other tools that I've seen that write incredible articles where they almost assume you're using their product
Mm-hmm.
in the narrative that they pose. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we're starting to try ourselves. And I love that because not only am I saying, oh, here's an optional solution, I'm saying, obviously, you're using this tool because this
Right.
is the solution. It's a really great way to hack that reader. And then you have so many reasons to introduce that product throughout the rest of the content.
Ahrefs does that really well. We were actually talking to Joshua Hardwick over there, and
Yes, I
that was
listened to
one of
that.
the things. That was one of the things he was saying is like, you've got so many how-to posts out there, and there's this like, and I used to be of this camp where it's like, I want to tell people how to do it without the thing, so they understand that they need the thing, our thing, to do
Yes.
the thing. And like, I get that methodology, I get that understanding, but if I'm also at the point right now where like I have a problem I need to solve, like scaling content, I want to know how I can do it specifically, and I try to remember now as a reader and as a content person, I don't remember the last website that I actually read something on. I know that I read stuff. I don't
Yeah.
remember what that website was. So, you know, this whole idea of showing product in the thing, I'm now of a completely different mindset, and I'm going to take this a step back for a second, and then I want to just get your final thoughts on all this. But something I put out there on LinkedIn a little bit ago was a lot of how-to posts don't actually tell you how to; they tell you what. And
Yes.
um, and what I see here is something very similar to that, right? They're not telling you how to create more high-quality content. Not really. They're telling you what you need to do it, not how to do it.
You are absolutely right. And I saw that when we were at the bottom. I think I made a comment similar to it where, like, we also never say here that the content is going to gain quality from any of the tips that exist
Right.
there. We just say here are things that you can do. But there's no proof within this article that that content is going to do what you need it to do to
Right.
achieve your goal. And
Right.
like, there's so much opportunity to tell them here's exactly the tactical steps. Like, and when I say steps, I mean a numbered list of what I want, and then linking out to other content that can provide you with so much detail and further resources that this person, if they were like me, would be going down a rabbit hole so they could build their content strategy around it.
Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think we miss the actual like tactical things and just end up going what instead of how?
Because I don't think we're thinking like, and
Okay.
I have absolutely made this mistake. I've been creating content from a content creator's perspective. I'm trying to develop something. I'm trying to make sure I have everything that I need it to answer in there. I'm trying to build a narrative. And it's like I've almost forgotten that that consumer doesn't know what I know,
Right.
and that there are gaps in what I've written that I need to very clearly articulate. For example, create a style guide. If I don't know what goes into a style guide, telling me that MailChimp created a style guide does not do me any good because that was one
Right.
of the examples in there. That's excellent and awesome, but why is that good? And should I use that style guide? And if I should use that style guide, what really matters in that? Like, those are the things that a person is asking. So I think
Right.
the best thing that we can do is not think so much about the keywords or what it is that we're trying to solve and put in there, but think about more about the questions that I would ask if I was looking into this query and reading this article. What questions pop up for me, and how can I then provide that person with really clear details to respond to it?
Yeah, and I think by missing stuff like that too, like if you're not answering that question, like something like create a style guide, and then you don't give like even the basics of what needs to be in there or where to look, you're essentially asking them to leave, and you're giving them more questions than answers, and that's
Yes.
you're also like in some ways handing over an opportunity to a competitor who may have actually scaled content to answer that question that you're not answering. So like that's something to
Exactly.
really consider there. We are at the top of the hour. Oh my, this went by so fast.
I had
Um,
so much fun.
yeah, me too. Me too. Is there anything, like, if we were to summarize sort of where your thoughts are on scaling content, briefs, working with freelancers, all of the stuff that we've been talking about, if you could sum that up into like a 30-second little snippet, what
Yes.
would that look like?
I would say scaling content is absolutely vital for understanding who your target audience is. In order to scale content and create high quality content, you need to accept imperfection, but you also need to be able to optimize consistently so you can prioritize against it. In doing that, you want to identify the freelancers that, one, understand your product, your education, your target market, can write to your goals, and also who can adapt, because you will be adapting consistently. Work with those writers as much as possible so that they're learning. And then finally, prioritize content briefs. I cannot emphasize that enough. Templatize as much as you can and create something that that writer can then sink their teeth into. Do that by digging deeply into the SERP, understanding what's working, and from the perspective of a consumer. If I were reading this article, what would I need from it? What don't I know that I need this article to tell me?
Fantastic. We're going to wrap it up here, but I believe you also have something special for the audience that you wanted to throw out there, yeah?
I sure do. Well, I think everyone should sign up for Scribe. So I have a bit of a promo code. So if anyone is interested in signing up for Scribe Pro, which is the Scribe tool that also has some of these incredible features, I'd love for you to go and sign up and then use my promo code at the cutting room. So just go in, sign up, and then include that promo code. Once you do that, you'll get Scribe Pro free for a month. I'd love to see you use it, and I'd love to hear your insight on the product. We're constantly talking to users, and that honestly helps us create more content.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate your time. Audience, if you would like to see more of The Cutting Room, please go to thecontentstudio.com/The Cutting Room, sign up, and you can get access to all of the previous episodes. The Vault, which has this edit, as well as all of the other guests that we've had on the show, their edits as well, along with exclusive bonuses and notifications about what's coming up next. We have some really great guests coming up within the next few months, folks from 𝗟𝗂𝗋 and ActiveCampaign and a bunch of others. So please tune in, and we'll see you in the next one.